Thank you. It's really great to be with you here this morning, talking as I was to my husband and the kids over breakfast. I said, I'm going to speak at a conference on smart energy this morning, and then heard my 4-year-old say to his dad, Mummy's going to speak to a conference of smarty pants. Maybe there are a few smarty pants there in the audience amongst you. And then he said, and will you bring some home? I think what he actually meant was smarties, not smarty pants. I think he may be a little bit disappointed if I brought a group of you home. But that's really what we're here to talk about. What does smart energy mean to the future of Wales? What does it mean to our children? My children sitting there having cornflakes shoveled into their mouths this morning. What does it mean for their children? How can it contribute to the goals that we've got set out in the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act? It's absolutely fantastic that alongside the ambition of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, we have now also a stronger framework to address climate change with legally binding emission reduction targets contained within the Environment Act. However, I don't think we've really got to grips with what it will mean to reduce our emissions by at least 80% by 2050. And some scientists are actually calling for zero emissions by this time. So I'd like to share with you some of my thoughts on the energy implications relating to each of the wellbeing goals. Now, the energy supply sector is one of the biggest greenhouse gas emitters in Wales, and the latest greenhouse gas inventory for Wales showed that energy supply constituted 42% of total emissions in 2013. So if we're to meet our international and domestic obligations on reducing emissions, we clearly need to relook at how energy is generated, supplied and transmitted. How can we therefore balance a prosperous Wales goal with one that's not a detriment to our environment or to our health? In Wales, the energy and environmental sector is estimated to have a market value sales turnover of 4.7 billion, employing 58,000 people in over 2,000 companies, larger than a number of other key sectors, including manufacturing, construction, and food and farming. The sector has demonstrated above average growth at UK level, and it is estimated that there's the potential for £50 billion of investments in low carbon electricity production in Wales over the next 10 to 15 years. A local success story is one of the Cennin Group based in South Wales, which has diversified successfully alongside cement manufacturing to embrace innovative recycling techniques to achieve a circular economy. It's already invested in renewable energy generation, which very soon will generate enough surplus power to meet the energy needs of Porthcawl, a small town towards Bridgend. It's also looking at innovation that will allow it to use waste products from the steel, coal and oil refining industries in cement production. So how are we taking advantage of this significant opportunity, especially with major infrastructure projects being planned here in Wales? If Wales is to transition to a cleaner, greener, sustainable energy future, there is a consensus that renewable energy must play a greater part in the energy mix. Achieving this will be key to meeting the climate change commitments set out in the Environment Act and to fulfilling the sustainable development ambitions of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And that brings me on to the goal of a more resilient Wales. How are renewables being promoted as part of major infrastructure programmes, and what further potential is there with the establishment of an infrastructure commission in Wales? So of course, locally here, there's a lot of excitement around the City deal, a £1.2 billion investment into economic growth in the South Wales region. But are we focusing on a City deal that takes us to 2050 and beyond, or are we focusing on a City deal of 2020, which misses out on some of the opportunities to reach our goals of a healthier, more prosperous and more resilient Wales? How is the City deal exploring renewable energy generation across the region? How could the metro system that's proposed be powered by renewables? And is this even actually being considered? Some huge challenges in terms of the thinking amongst our public sector leaders. How are renewables being considered as part of the Wales Infrastructure Investment Plan? And of course, we know that Bristol's newly elected Mayor Marvin Rees has recently announced that the city's first major step towards carbon neutrality by 2050, giving the go-ahead for £5 million in capital funding to build a low-carbon district heating network to serve the city. This will supply low-carbon heat to buildings via a network of underground pipes, including biomass boilers. Over time, the city plans to phase out the use of natural gas in favour of renewables, and I'm sure that the City deal could support similar schemes in Cardiff region if there is the ambition. Key projects such as the Swansea Bay Tidal Lagoon, along with plans for others across Wales, have the potential to provide low-carbon energy to thousands of homes whilst providing opportunities for local jobs, but is still stuck in the wranglings of the UK Government and Natural Resources Wales. Why are community renewable energy schemes so complicated and take so much time and commitment, usually voluntary, to deliver? And once they've succeeded, why can't the energy be used locally? Why is Wales so far behind the rest of the UK in terms of energy generated by renewables? Now, these may be naive questions, but they sadly demonstrate that we still face major obstacles in delivering our vision for a low-carbon Wales. The forthcoming Wales Bill is likely to give the Welsh Government further powers to make decisions on large energy projects. And at a time when there are many large energy projects on the horizon, this could mark the tipping point in terms of the approach to energy development in Wales. For a nation that's renowned for our natural environment, the green grass of home, are we making the most of our natural resources? Scotland has announced its ambition to be the renewable energy capital of the world and has committed to generating the equivalent of 100% gross annual electricity consumption and 11% of heat consumption by 2020. I think that if we want to create a goal of a vibrant culture, heritage and thriving Welsh language, then we cannot ignore our natural heritage and look at how best we can sustain them. National Trust in Wales, the guardian of our heritage properties, have been a pioneer in this and state, by harnessing the power of nature and being careful with the energy we use, the places we find special can be beautiful forever. With a commitment to invest £30 million to meet their target to reduce fossil fuel use by 50% and to source 50% of energy from renewable sources by 2020, they have already had more than 140 renewable energy systems operational on sites across England, Wales and Northern Ireland, with an installed capacity of 2.3 megawatts heating and over 1 megawatts of electricity generation. Now, Natural Resources Wales, guardians of our natural heritage, have committed to their carbon positive project to help reduce their carbon impact by reducing emissions, enhancing sequestration and protecting carbon stocks, and becoming an exemplar across other public sector bodies. And I'm sure that both these organisations will transform the way they use energy within their estate. At a national scale, however, we should look at the transformational changes as a result of Energiewende, Germany's energy transition towards more renewable energy, which has moved them away from a monopoly of a handful of big energy companies that we currently have in the UK to a bottom-up grassroots movement that has created hundreds of community enterprises who are becoming energy resilient and using the income generated to regenerate their areas. A fantastic example of how we can make our communities more cohesive. Another of the wellbeing goals contained within the Act. We have some green shoots in Wales, and the establishment of a Community Energy Wales is a key step towards this, but the uncertain future created by UK policies that has almost brought the renewable generation capacity in the UK to a grinding halt, along with slow and unclear planning consents at local level, means that we still have a long way to go before we can create our own energy revolution within communities here in Wales. Alongside mitigation efforts, let's not forget the critical need to adapt our homes to the consequences of climate change. Now, we know that there are currently 220,000 homes in Wales that are at risk of flooding, and this will increase as the current estimated cost of £200 million to put it right if we do not tackle climate change. And if we look at what's happened over the last couple of days, things that are happening across our country at a scale never seen before. We know that, and I don't want to sort of labour on the referendum result, but if we look at the way that the voting went, if we look at some of the analysis, which was that a large proportion of people were concerned about migration, and that's what brought them out to vote to exit the European Union. We know that some of those most prominent Leave campaigners are also not convinced, shall we say, about the impact on climate change, the impact that that's likely to have on future generations. But if they're not concerned about climate change and they are concerned about migration, then there is something there really that they need to focus on. Because if we're concerned about migration now, then we really ain't seen nothing yet. Because if global warming continues in the way that it does, then it's predicted that there will be millions upon millions of people across the world who are displaced to other parts of the world. The first thing, of course, that is likely to be affected is the availability of food, an issue that could probably be met at a cost, but probably not by our most vulnerable. And that takes me on to our goal of a more equal Wales. Now, you will have come across the increase in food banks in recent years in Wales. We had our first fuel bank opened this year in Cardiff, where existing food bank users will receive a credit which they can use to repay emergency credit and top up their gas and electricity meters. The recent stats from Fuel Poverty Coalition Wales show that 1 in 3, or 386 households in Wales, were estimated to live in fuel poverty, the second highest proportion of fuel-poor households in the UK, making it a daily decision whether to heat or to eat. The number of fuel-poor households in social housing is 70,000, 31% of social households. We know that already there are price differences across the UK on domestic energy bills, where those in South Wales pay approximately £100 more on their energy bills than other parts of the UK. And almost 20% of households in Wales are off gas grid, reliant on costlier oil and electricity to heat their homes, especially in rural areas. But innovation in recent years, such as the Salsa House, designed by experts from Cardiff University, the UK's first purpose-built, low-cost, energy-smart house capable of exporting more energy to the national electricity grid than it uses, shows how we can begin to address some of the challenges of climate change. This energy-positive house has the potential to be adapted and replicated in future housing developments across the UK, creating wide-ranging long-term benefits for the economy, the environment and occupiers. Rolling this out as part of new housing developments across Wales, alongside scaling up the Nest and Arbed schemes, could help to reduce the numbers of those in fuel poverty significantly. The implications of fuel poverty, the Welsh definition of fuel poverty is where a household spends more than 10% of its income on fuel used to maintain a satisfactory level of heating, has considerable impacts on health. Which brings me on to our goal of a healthier Wales. Rural households often use fuels other than gas to heat their homes, as they're more likely to be off the gas mains network. Households off the gas mains network are more likely to use liquefied petroleum gas or heating oil to heat their properties, which significantly increases their expenditure on heating costs. The cost to the Welsh Health Service for treating cold-related admissions amounts to over £100 million per year, with 475 deaths every year directly attributable to vulnerable people living in cold homes. This is currently a bigger killer than alcohol-related deaths in Wales. And in the UK, experts believe that about 29,000 deaths each year are linked to air pollution. A new study published by the BMJ this week has also linked air pollution to increased mental illness in children, demonstrating that children are particularly vulnerable to poor air quality. And the A472 in Crumlin in Caerphilly County Borough has recorded some of the UK's worst air pollution. Stats from Asthma UK Cymru indicate that 314,000 people in Wales have asthma. That's almost 1 in 10 of every child. And the percentage of patients registered with their GP for asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease was greater than in England. I do think that smarter and more informed use of energy can have an impact on all of these issues, and I'm really interested to see how this develops and how these opportunities are seized. The issues and challenges that I've highlighted above are obviously not just Wales-specific. We know that globally, fuel poverty, the consequences of insecure and unreliable energy systems, as well as unaffordable energy prices, are a problem experienced globally. What, therefore, does this mean if we are to meet our goal of being a globally responsible Wales? The data released by NASA earlier this year showed that the average global surface temperature rise in February was 1.35 degrees warmer than the average temperature for the month between 1951 and 1980. This is by far a bigger margin than we've ever seen before, and it may not feel like this in Wales, but 2015 shattered the record for the hottest year ever seen, based on data stretching back to 1850. And the Met Office also expects 2016 to set a new record, meaning that the global temperature record will have been broken now for 3 years in a row. And according to the latest evidence for the next climate change risk assessment, average temperatures in Wales have increased by 0.9 degrees C for the 2005 to 2014 decade, compared to the 1961 to 1990 average. And this will have a knock-on effect on rainfall and severe weather events that we're already experiencing. And of course, the agreement that we all signed up to in Paris last year at the end of 2015 calls for rapid global emissions reductions to stabilise warming at 2 degrees or as close to 1.5 degrees as possible. And this really does become a huge challenge when you realise that temperatures have already increased by 1 degree in the last 50 years. And it will require immediate action here and now if we have any chance of meeting those goals that we signed up to. And it's going to require action much more quickly than is being delivered at the moment. And in fact, Professor Kevin Anderson from the Tyndall Centre has warned the world has just gambled its future on the appearance in a puff of smoke of a carbon-sucking fairy godmother. Now, I do think he has a point. How do we move from the from well-meaning global leaders coming together to local governments, for example, making substantial change in their communities? And of course, the UN Sustainable Development Goals and a commitment to act together is fundamentally important, no matter what our politics, if we are to provide a better future for future generations after us and beyond. And the meteoric and rapid adoption and reliance on technology in areas such as the internet and mobile phones shows us the speed of change that is possible. Now, can we say that about the speed of change in our energy systems? I think in comparison, any changes here have probably been at a glacial pace. However, I am excited about the potential that having smart meters in every home across the UK can provide, the most significant infrastructure investment for a generation. Can we see a time when we can trade our energy consumption and choose when we want to purchase from and where we want to purchase from and when? How can public services benefit from the potential of having smart meters in our homes? Can these energy meters be connected to other daily routines such as home alarm systems or even to motion sensors in vulnerable or elderly persons' households to know if there's no activity in that household and to trigger an alert or an alarm, for example? Can this help us to give back some independence to elderly people who want to continue living in their home? Now, as someone whose last job was working in the police service, where we have a significant focus on safeguarding of individuals, I think there's huge opportunities in the way that smart meters could be used, hopefully not in a big brother way, but to share data with other public services whose jobs it is to help support and keep safe the most vulnerable. So as we heard earlier, could we be identifying those households whose electricity use diminishes in the last week of every month because they've run out of money? It provides a huge opportunity to help those who are out there helping the public service, to helping the public to keep them safe and to do that earlier and more effectively. And what about the potential of the Internet of Things? Well, a slightly scary thought if you think your fridge can order your milk for you, but our energy needs now are very different to a decade ago. So how can we use the data on our smart meters to predict the daily routine of our consumption and allow us to take advantage of daily energy price fluctuations, or to know when to sell back to the grid the energy we generate in our homes? Effective battery storage, potentially in every home or neighbourhood, could help us manage our energy use even more accurately and ultimately, as is the hope, eradicate fuel poverty. Now, I know that there are large numbers of really good examples of innovative practice emerging across Wales, strategies to reduce emissions through taking a holistic approach to energy management, introducing energy efficiency measures and using investor-save schemes to fund these, and of course exploring renewable technology solutions to support the transition to a low-carbon Wales. So coming back to the issue of what does a smart energy future mean for Wales, I would end by saying that this is the only future to Wales if we are to achieve the Wales that we want for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you.